It was on the 8th, the 9th and the 10th of April in 1904 that the Book of the Law was written. Its author none other than the infamous Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, regarded by many as a black magician, wore many hats that included being an occultist. He was born in 1875, and as a young man he became known for being a great chess player as well as a competent mountaineer. He is best known for his books and workings on magic, and he specified that his dabbling in magic was different from all the other witches and magicians of that time. His form of magic was special, even in the spelling, magic with a K. He married Rose Edith Kelly on the 12th of August 1903, and they had their honeymoon in Egypt. The marriage was to last only a few years, but Rose, in the early years, was a big influence on his magical path. In 1904, their honeymoon took them to Egypt, where they began to encounter high strangeness. In Cairo, Egypt, at noon on each of the 3 days, Crowley performed a magical ritual that put him in touch with an entity named Awas. Originally, the magical ritual was an attempt to invoke the god Horus, the Egyptian god that is the son of Osiris and Isis. The ritual Crowley was performing was to help him come into contact with his holy guardian angel. To Aleister Crowley, this was one's higher self, or as he termed it, one's silent self. Yet later in his life he changed his thought and stated instead that this holy guardian angel was indeed another being independent of oneself, yet attached to one. This entity may be anyone or anything that now resided in different realms, but that entity was there to help guide one if one were attuned to it, like a holy guardian angel watching over you. And he wrote, "It should never be forgotten for a single moment that the central and essential work of the magician is the attainment of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. Once he's achieved this, he must of course be left entirely in the hands of that angel, who can be invariably and inevitably relied upon to lead him to the further great step, crossing of the abyss and the attainment of the grade of Master of the Temple." End quote. Aleister Crowley completed this magical work and was able to make contact with this entity named Awas, who dictated to him the Book of the Law, also known as Liber al-Vel Legis. The books were written as 3 chapters, titled with Egyptian gods' names. The first is Nuit, the goddess of the night and starry heavens. The second was Hadit, which represents eternal energy, the infinite motion of things, the central core of all. And the third was Ra-Hur-Kuit, the god of war and vengeance. Awas dictated the book to Aleister Crowley, approaching him from behind his left shoulder, and Crowley describes it thus. The voice is described as passionate and hurried, and was of deep timbre, musical and expressive, its tones solemn, voluptuous, tender, fierce, or aught else as suited the moods of the message, not bass, perhaps a rich tenor or baritone. And Crowley also added that the voice was not native or of a foreign accent. And Crowley describes this being. Awas seemed to be a tall, dark man in his 30s, well knit, active and strong, with the face of a savage king, and eyes veiled lest their gaze should destroy what they saw. The dress was not Arab. It suggested Assyria or Persia, but very vaguely. End quote. Crowley did consider that Awas was but a representation of his subconsciousness, yet he also doubted this, and he writes about this. He writes, "Of course I wrote them, ink on paper in the material sense, but they are not my words, and thus Awas be taken to be no more than my subconscious self, or some part of it. In that case, my conscious self being ignorant of the truth in the book, and hostile to most of the ethics and philosophy of the book, Awas is a severely suppressed part of me." End quote. Crowley originally published the Book of the Law in 1912 in the journal The Equinox, a journal that Crowley published himself. Most of the articles in it were written by Crowley, and it mainly promoted well, Crowley's writing, his fictional writing, his poetry, as well as his magical works. Yet, at times, Crowley seemed unsure about the Book of the Law. He wrote, "I was trying to forget the whole business. The fact of the matter that I resented the Book of the Law with my whole soul. For one thing, it knocked my Buddhism completely on the head. I was bitterly opposed to the principles of the book on almost every point of morality. And the third chapter seemed to me gratuitously atrocious." Yet, despite his moaning about the book and its creation, Crowley still found time to write 2 commentaries on it. He wrote, "The Book of the Law annoyed me. I was still obsessed by the idea that secrecy was necessary to a magical document, that publication would destroy its importance. I determined, in a mood which I can only describe as a fit of ill temper, to publish the Book of the Law and then get rid of it forever." Yet the Book of the Law, due to its popularity, has been reprinted many times and is still read today by occultists, magicians, and those intrigued in the writings of the man known as the Beast.